Part 73. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 722. Reverse, repent. Tang Ning looked at her and said in a daze, didn't we agree that this is just a temporary measure? Expedient measure. Wanyanyan glanced at him and said, dozens of our Sushan tribes know that you want to marry me. If you go back on your word now, where will my face go? Tang Ning stared at her blankly. At this moment, he finally understood that Wanyanyan had been planning on him from the beginning. He regarded her as a friend, racking his brains and risking his life to help her fight for the position. Her position was stable, but he was injured. In the end, she actually plotted against him. There is such a person in the world who repays kindness with hatred. Zhao Man's matter has not been settled yet, so how can we allow others to jump in line? Tang Ning waved her hands and said, this is absolutely impossible. You have to do it if you can, and you have to do it if you don't. Wanyanyan said nonchalantly, I have asked Ana to prepare. We will get married in 3 days. After saying that, she raised her head and strode out like a proud peacock. After leaving the big tent, her aura immediately weakened, and she patted her chest, showing an expression of lingering fear. It took a lot of courage for her to say what she just said. Ana came over and asked, Princess, do you want to prepare for the wedding? Of course, Wanyanyan said without hesitation, he has already won. If I am not ready to get married, what will others think of me? Ana looked at her, pondered for a moment, and said, Princess, the Han people have a saying, a melon that is twisted is not sweet. Wanyanyan rolled her eyes at her and said, I don't care if his melon is sweet or not. I just want to twist it. If I twist it, I will be happy, can't I? I sighed helplessly and said, okay, then I'll let someone arrange it. Tang Ning sat on the bed with a blank look on her face. He still can't believe that he was actually tricked by Xiaomaniu. What's fake is fake. How could he get married to Wanyanyan? Even if he agreed, his kidney wouldn't agree. Chen Zhou walked in anxiously, glanced at Tang Ning, and said, Sir, the princess likes you so much, why do you reject her thousands of miles away? Tang Ning glanced at him and said, if someone likes me can go around the capital, do all of me have to accept it? Chen Zhou thought for a moment and said, as long as the ladies agree, it's not impossible. Get out, Tang Ning glared at him and said angrily, did you do it on purpose just now? No, no, Chen Zhou waved his hands repeatedly. Tang Ning ignored him and got up from the bed. Chen Zhou hurriedly said, Sir, you are still injured. If you need anything, I can help you. Tang Ning waved her hand and said, don't be idle. Go back and pack your things. We'll leave soon. He came to the grassland to complete the mission, but this does not mean that he can help himself in the mission. With 10,000 cavalry and 400,000 troops, it is not a bad idea to overthrow the grassland. After this incident, Tang Ning has understood that since Wanyan, judging from Khan's attitude towards Wanyanyan, he had no intention of letting her succeed to the throne. It would be useless no matter how many tribes she had in her hands. It would be better to solve the problem simply and rudely once and for all, and then he could call it a day and go home. Lao Zheng walked in from outside, glanced at him, and said, it's not what a man would do if he stole someone else's girl and just wanted to run away. Tang Ning looked at him and asked, who stole this girl? Lao Zheng said, those who steal hearts are more hateful than those who steal things. Tang Ning said angrily, can you blame me? From the beginning to the end, if she had some evil thoughts about Wanyanyan, that was it. The problem was that he had never had any interest in her. Is it wrong to be handsome, smart, and masculine? You can't leave, Lao Zheng said without arguing with him, as soon as you leave, her tribe will be unable to defend it sooner or later. If the grassland is lost, the Chen kingdom will fight many battles and many people will die. Lao Zheng looked at him and said, you are doing it for the country and for the sake of justice. Don't worry about marrying her. Your wives will understand. For the country, for the sake of justice, but not for himself. Don't force emotional matters, and it won't be sweet if you force her to do something. Tang Ning believes that Wang Yanyan doesn't want to force her to do anything. Tang Ning looked at him and said, I will solve this matter myself. In the tent, Wang Yanyan was humming a light tune. Yu walked in, handed her a letter and said, Princess, this is given to you by Mr. Tang. Wang Yanyan opened the letter and saw only 2 lines written briefly on the letter. See you at Shili River in the afternoon. The Shili River is the closest river to the Wen tribe. Girls in the tribe often bathe there, and it is also a place where young men and women often have private meetings. Wang Yanyan's face turned red and she whispered, What did he ask me to do in Shili? There must be no good intentions. Yu said, I will reject him. Wait a minute. Wang Yanyan put the letter away and said, It's better not to have a good heart. Tang Ning arranged to meet Wang Yanyan, mainly because the things she wanted to talk about were relatively sensitive. It was already late at that time and her expressions could not be seen clearly, so neither of them would look embarrassed. When he went out this time, he only took Lao Zheng with him. When he came to the river, Tang Ning discovered that it was getting dark later in the grassland. When it was about to reach Chen time, the sky had not yet darkened, and a rosy cloud appeared on the horizon in the distance. The entire sky is reflected in a bright red color. Wang Yanyan rode up alone, walked to Tang Ning, gently jumped off the horse, lowered her head and asked, What do you want to say to me? The evening glow was beautiful, shining on her face, even the extremely fine hair on her face could be seen. Her face was covered with a layer of light pink, and it was hard to tell whether it was a blush or sunset. At this moment, although Wang Yanyan was not wearing any makeup, she had a more beautiful feeling. Tang Ning opened her mouth, but for a moment she didn't know where to start. He stretched his body to ease the awkward atmosphere and asked, Do you like the grassland or the Han people's place? Wang Yanyan said, The Han people's place is good, but the grassland is my home. Of course I like the grassland. It would be great if there were so many good things on the grassland. Tang Ning breathed a sigh of relief and explained, Look, you like the grassland, but I will return to Chen sooner or later. If I really marry you, wouldn't it delay you? You belong to the grassland, but there is no grassland in my home. It doesn't matter, you don't have it, I do. Wang Yanyan looked at him and said indifferently, When I become the Khan, this piece of grassland will be ours. You can move here at that time. We will herd horses and sheep here and we will be very happy. This. Tang Ning looked at Wang Yanyan and had to admit that what she said made sense. Sooner or later, their family will leave the capital. Su Mei wants to go to Kandy to compete for the Saint Girl, just to fight for a place for them. Kandy has many mountains and forests, poisonous insects, and backward development. In comparison, the grassland environment is much better. Here, there are blue sky, white clouds, green mountains, and clear water. The only drawback is the scarcity of goods, but this is not a problem at all. Opening up a trade route and completing the exchange of materials between the grassland and the state of Chen can completely solve this problem. If he had to choose between the grassland and Gizhu, he would choose the grassland without hesitation. Wang Yanyan blinked, looked at him, and asked, What's wrong? Am I wrong? She was right. This was a great temptation for Tang Ning, but he has always been a person who can resist temptation. He gritted his teeth and was about to speak when Lao Zheng came over. Tang Ning glanced at Lao Zheng. He was about to talk to Wang Yanyan about serious matters, but he came to make trouble. However, before Tang Ning could speak, Lao Zheng squatted down, picked up a stone from the ground, and shot it into the half-man-high grass on the opposite bank with a flick of his finger. A muffled groan came from the grass, and a piece of grass on the opposite bank suddenly became turbulent. Old Zheng looked at the dozens of figures emerging from the grass and pulled out a butcher knife from his back. Without even looking at Tang Ning and Wanyan Yan, he said calmly, "You go first." Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 723. Tang Ning and Wanyan Yan were discussing things by the river. There were so many people lurking on the other side of the river. It was obvious that they were coming with bad intentions. When Wanyan Yan pulled out the short knife from her waist, Tang Ning held her wrist and said, "Let's go." "You are right to listen to what Lao Zheng said." Lao Zheng wanted them to leave because he obviously felt that they would only be a drag here. Tang Ning came out today and did not carry any powerful goo insects with her. Staying here with Wanyan Yan would only drag them down. Lao Zheng's hind legs. Wanyan Yan retracted her dagger, got on her horse, and took Tang Ning with her. "Hold me tight," she said, then galloped away in the direction from which she came. Deep in the grass across the river, a masked man watched the two leave and said in a deep voice, "Chase." A person next to him looked ahead and said, "Chief, there is another person there." The masked man looked towards the other side and saw a figure standing there. He waved his hand and said, "Whoever blocks the way will die." More than 10 people raised their scimitars and rushed towards Lao Zheng. Lao Zheng looked at them and asked, "Is this really necessary?" The only thing that responded to him was the scimitars in the hands of the dozen or so people. Lao Zheng clenched the butcher's knife, looked at the figure rushing toward him, and licked his dry lips. Deep in his eyes, there was a trace of bloodshot eyes and a long suppressed throbbing. On the grassland, Wanyan Yan was galloping on her horse, and Tang Ning could only hug her tightly to prevent her from falling. He looked at Wanyan Yan and asked, "Where are you going?" Wanyan Yan said, "Go back to the Wen tribe and bring in reinforcements." Tang Ning said, "Your whereabouts have been leaked. Since they were able to set up an ambush by the river, I'm afraid there will be more ambushes on the road." As soon as he finished speaking, dozens of light horses suddenly sprang out from behind a hill in front. The road ahead was cut off, and even though it was only 10 miles away from the Wen tribe, it was now as far away as a chasm. Wanyan Yan's expression changed slightly, and at the next moment she tightened the reins of her horse and galloped away in the other direction. "Chase." Among the dozens of people, a masked man at the front said in a low voice, "Your Highness is destined to die, not to live." Wen Department. Chen Zhou walked to Ana's tent and asked, "Isn't the princess back yet?" Ana glanced at him and said, "When your adults come back, the princess will come back." "It's so late, what are they doing by the river?" Chen Zhou looked at him and asked tentatively, "Why don't you go take a look?" Ana glanced at him and said, "It's none of your business, you should just stay in the ministry." Chen Zhou walked out of Ana's tent, still feeling uneasy. In the darkness, footsteps suddenly came from the front. The footsteps were slow and heavy. Using the light coming from the tent, Chen Zhou saw old Zheng covered in blood. His heart skipped a beat and he asked, "What's going on, sir?" Lao Zheng glanced at him and frowned, "They didn't come back." This sight made Chen Zhou's hair stand on end. He couldn't help but shudder and said, "No, no. Princess. Grown-ups. Where are you?" In Chile, more than half of the Wen tribe came here, holding lanterns in their hands and calling loudly. The fourth princess and the prince-in-law disappeared here, and the news spread back to the Wen tribe. Under the command of Ana, the entire tribe almost mobilized to look for them. However, no matter how many people shouted along the river, they received no response. By the river, a person suddenly tripped over something under his feet and asked in confusion, "What is it?" He held up a lantern and took a closer look, only to realize that the thing that almost tripped him just now was actually an arm. The arm was broken at the base, and the blood dyed the grass under his feet brown. He was startled and took a breath. He couldn't help but take a few steps back. His feet slipped and he almost tripped over something. By the light of the lantern, he saw that the ground under his feet was full of broken limbs. His left foot was stepping on a palm, and his right foot was stepping on someone's thigh. Vomit. How could a normal person stand this kind of stimulation? The lantern in his hand fell to the ground and he couldn't help but vomit violently. When there was nothing left in his stomach to vomit, it turned into retching again. At this time, other people around him also discovered the Shura field, and their behavior was the same as him. People with poor psychological quality were directly frightened to the point of incontinence. The smell of blood was mixed with the stench, making the place stinky. Chen Zhou turned his back to the river and had already vomited out all the food he had eaten yesterday. Ayana was no better than him. She covered her mouth with a pale face and heard the sound of vomiting coming from behind. Finally I couldn't hold it back anymore and joined them. It was daybreak, and the Wen tribe finally returned to their tribe. The women who were waiting in the tribe immediately came out, took out the dried meat, looked at their men, and said distressedly, "Why are you coming back now? You must be starving after being hungry all night. Let's eat some dried meat first. There are still some things at home. There's half a leg of lamb." Vomit. The man's complexion had changed from white to blue. After taking a look at the dried meat, he couldn't help retching. However, all the contents in his stomach had been vomited out last night. While retching, he said to the woman, he kept waving his hands and shouting, take it away quickly." A big event happened in the Wen tribe. If you look into it more closely, it involves more than just the Wen tribe. Last night, dozens of people attacked the fourth princess and her husband. The fourth princess and her husband have now disappeared without a trace, and those dozens of people have all been beheaded. After identification, those people were all from the Pucha tribe. The leader of the Pucha tribe was beheaded, and most of the dozens of warriors under his command were also beheaded. Let alone how they died, the Pucha tribe was unfavorable to the fourth princess and her husband, which was a rebellion, and the Pucha tribe has always followed the eldest prince's lead. In other words, is this the eldest prince going to assassinate the fourth princess? Sending 50 warriors from the Pucha tribe to assassinate his own sister, it is conceivable to what extent the eldest prince has been crazy. Ayana said with a gloomy face, "I'll report to the Khan right away." "Send someone to find them first." Lao Zheng walked in, glanced at her, and said, "They didn't come back, something must have happened on the way." Lao Zheng's expression was calm, but it made Ayana feel cold all over. She nodded subconsciously and said, "Yes." Lao Zheng nodded and turned to leave. Ayana thought of the miserable situation by the river, which was like hell on earth, and couldn't help saying, "He is a butcher." "Tigers occasionally eat grass." The middle-aged woman looked at her and said, "But don't forget, tigers are always tigers. No matter how long they eat grass, they can't change their nature of eating meat. The longer their animal nature is suppressed, the more terrible it will be when it erupts. Grassland, an unknown river somewhere. The fish is burnt." "I know." Tang Ning squatted by the river, a little absent-minded. After Wan Yanyan reminded him, he turned the wooden stick in his hand and turned the grilled fish over. Last night, they were ambushed by mysterious people. The enemy had too many people and they could not fight hard. He and Wan Yanyan fled all the way. Fortunately, she was familiar with the terrain here. It was night, so they abandoned their horses and ran for several hours before they got rid of the pursuers. At dawn, Wan Yanyan told him that they were lost. Last night, in the case of unclear direction, the two ran around to escape and lost their way. Looking around, they saw grasslands everywhere. They finally found a river. Fortunately, the fish in the river were fat enough to solve their hunger problem. Tang Ning thought for a moment, looked at Wan Yanyan, and asked, "Can't we go back to Wen tribe by following this river?" Wan Yanyan shook her head and said, "This is not the same river, and I don't know which one it is. If we follow the river, we will definitely encounter a tribe, but it could also be the tribe of the eldest and third brothers. The pursuers last night must be the eldest prince or the third prince's men. If we meet them, we will fall into a trap. Tang Ning looked at her and asked again, you should know that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, but don't you know which direction Wen tribe is in? Wan Yanyan shook her head and said, I don't know. She said yesterday that she grew up in the grassland and was very familiar with the environment here. Tang Ning always felt that she didn't want to go back. He stared into her eyes and asked, are you lying to me? Wan Yanyan looked away and said in panic, how could it be? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 724. It's hard for a clever woman to cook without rice, and without seasoning. Tang Ning couldn't cook delicious grilled fish. But he has even eaten dry and woody wolf meat. Compared with this, fish meat is already good. Tang Ning first let Wan Yanyan eat half, and then he ate the other half, and then put out the firewood. Although they got rid of the pursuers, it did not mean that they were completely out of danger. He knew that those behind him had not given up yet and were moving along the road. River looks for them both. They were searching separately at first, but after two people were left alone and were destroyed by Tang Ning and Wan Yanyan, they gathered together again. The night in the grassland was very cold, but both of them were in good physical condition. He and Wan Yanyan made a grass nest by the river and spent the night taking turns on duty. After catching two pursuers yesterday, Tang Ning learned from their mouths the mastermind behind the incident. The eldest prince had an undercover agent in the Wen tribe and sent more than 100 warriors from two tribes to chase them. Among them, those whom Lao Zheng stopped were from the Pucha tribe, and those who chased them halfway were from the Tishan tribe. Tang Ning and Wan Yanyan walked up the river, sighed softly, and said, your elder brother is so cruel to you. Wan Yanyan lowered her head and said, my eldest brother is the same as my father. They only have power in their eyes. My father killed all his uncles and many tribal leaders for the sake of the Khan's position. The same goes for my eldest brother. Tang Ning saw her depressed expression and comforted her, don't be sad, I'm not much better than you. The best way to comfort a person who is in a miserable situation is to tell her that you are worse off than she is. It is not enough to just tell her that she must be positive no matter how hard life is. Wan Yanyan was indeed attracted by his words and asked in surprise, what's wrong with you? So Tang Ning told her about his miserable experience in the eyes of others. After Wan Yanyan heard this, she gritted her teeth in anger and said angrily, they went too far. So, you can only rely on yourself in life. Tang Ning glanced at her and said, you are just a princess by others, but you can become a Khan by yourself. Not long after he finished speaking, several voices came from behind. There are signs of a fire. They just passed by here. The fire hasn't gone out yet, they haven't gone far. Chase. The grassland is open and often windy, so the sound can travel very far. The sound from behind is very subtle, which means that the other party is still far away from here, but we can't relax. Tang Ning looked at a grassy slope on the river bank and said, go there to take shelter. This is how they avoided the pursuers along the way. If they gathered together, the search area would be narrowed and they would not be found. If they spread out, they would be taken care of by Tang Ning and Wan Yanyan, who would also split up and join together. Eventually they were divided into two groups, with each group limited to 20 people. These 20 people are the most powerful warriors in the tribe. If there are only 10 people, Tang Ning and Wan Yanyan can barely fight. If there are 20 people, the two of them will have no choice but to run away. The two of them had abandoned their horses long ago and were hiding behind a grassy hill. Listening to the footsteps walking away by the river, Tang Ning whispered, one team passed by, and there is another team. We can't continue along the river, otherwise sooner or later they will be caught. Wan Yanyan thought for a while, looked up at the sun, looked left and right, pointed in another direction, and said, "Go this way, 50 miles to the northwest, there is a river." Tang Ning was stunned for a moment, looked at her, and asked, "Don't you know the way?" I suddenly remembered. Wang Yanyan's eyes rolled around and she said, "I remembered that my mother-in-law took me here to play when I was a child. This is a matter of life and death, so we can't be careless." Tang Ning looked at her and asked, "Are you sure you remember correctly?" Wang Yanyan waved her hand and said, "Don't worry, we are on the same boat now, how could I harm myself?" While Tang Ning and Wang Yanyan were slowly moving forward in the northwest direction, Ayana of Wuyan tribe looked at a man and said angrily, "Hubo, why did you betray the fourth princess?" Just today, the Wuyan department conducted a detailed investigation and finally identified the person who leaked the whereabouts of the fourth princess. The man panicked, "It's not me, it's really not me." "Stop pretending." Aina looked at him and said, "The fourth princess has known for a long time that you are the eldest prince's son, but I didn't expect you to be so bold." When the man heard this, a look of surprise finally appeared on his face. He turned around suddenly and ran out of the tent quickly. However, as soon as he ran out of the tent, within a few steps, his body trembled, and then he fell to the ground. The arrow passed through the back of his neck, and blood foam poured out of Hubo's mouth. His eyes were wide open, and he did not close his unwilling eyes until his death. Ayu put away her bow and said with a stern face, "The princess and the consort have not been found yet. Dozens of Tishan tribe including their leader are missing, what does the Khan say?" Aina said, "The Pucha tribe rebelled and died. We will no longer hold other members of the tribe accountable for their crimes. We are ordered to find the fourth princess as soon as possible." Ayu asked, "What about the eldest prince?" Aina clenched her fists and said, "The eldest prince was not mentioned." Ayu was stunned, and then said angrily, "Pucha is a tribe under the eldest prince. This matter must have been instigated by the eldest prince. Why don't you go investigate the eldest prince?" The middle-aged woman stood up and said, "Because he is the child of Khan." Ayu said, "Isn't it the fourth princess?" "Because he is the eldest prince." The middle-aged woman glanced at her and said, "Because he is the next Khan designated by the Khan. For the Khan, all the princes and princesses combined are not as good as him." Ayu showed indignation. Aina looked at him, shook her head, and said, "Let's find the princess first." The assassination of the fourth princess and the betrayal of the Pucha tribe are a big deal for the Sushan tribes. The Pucha tribe is under the eldest prince. Whether this matter was instigated by the eldest prince is also one of the focuses of everyone's attention. When everyone was waiting for the Khan to investigate the matter thoroughly, the Khan lightly passed it over, which was beyond the expectations of many people. This matter was obviously the eldest prince's so-called. The Khan's inaction was tacitly acknowledging that the eldest prince could take action against his brothers and sisters, and it also further demonstrated his position. If you think about it carefully, the Khan's hands are stained with the blood of many brothers, and it is reasonable for him to tolerate the eldest prince. If the fourth princess hadn't come back, it wouldn't be long before the tribe in her hands would be reassigned to the eldest prince or the third prince, just like the second prince. Inside the eldest prince's tent, "The Pucha tribe is all trash." The eldest prince looked very unhappy and said, "Dozens of people couldn't catch 2 people, and they were all killed. Why did I choose so many trash?" One person stepped forward and said nervously, "Prince, if we do this, will the Khan blame us?" The eldest prince glanced at him and said, "You don't understand yet, he doesn't care about our life or death, as long as someone can inherit his position in the end." In another tent, a person behind the third prince looked at him and said, "The Khan is too biased towards the eldest prince." "Who is more ruthless?" The third prince sneered and said, "What's the point of assassinating the fourth sister? If you want to talk about ruthlessness, Wanyan Chu is still not ruthless enough." Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 725. Chapter 720 of the main volume of Ruyi Little Man, Reinforcement. The assassination of the fourth princess and the prince-in-law was committed by the Pucha tribe, and the Pucha tribe was the loyal lackey of the eldest prince. It was obvious that the eldest prince was behind this incident. The eldest prince killed his half-sister, but the Khan ignored it. Various tribes in Sushan discussed this, wondering whether the Khan had decided to pass the throne to the eldest prince. If so, in the future, within a period of time, the situation on the grassland will definitely change dramatically. What can be predicted is that if the fourth princess dies, the 20 tribes in her hands will be taken back by the Khan. It is also obvious who will divide the taken back tribes. The biggest psychological gap is probably between the third prince and him. He and the eldest prince have been fighting for so long. Unexpectedly, Khan already has a favorite candidate in mind. Only he understands the feeling. The main department of Wanyan Department. In the large tent, Wanyan Khan looked at a map with an expressionless face. Two figures walked in and said, "Khan, the throne of Hyman is still not determined. These days, there are already signs of division." Wanyan Khan nodded but did not speak. One person thought for a while and said, "There is still no news from the fourth princess. In addition, the leader of the Tushan tribe and the 50 warriors have disappeared." Wanyan Khan waved his hand and said, "Let's continue talking about Hyman." The man paused and said, "Yes." After a while, the two recent leaders of the Shuhu department and the Jiagu department walked out of the tent. When they were far away, the former sighed and said, "Khan is still as ruthless as ever. In his eyes, these princes and princesses mean nothing." No. The Shuhu and Jiagu tribes were originally no less powerful than the Wanyan tribe. They were annexed by the Wanyan tribe not long ago, and the new leaders were once confidants of Wanyan Khan. The leader of the Jiagu tribe shook his head and said, "Khan is the wolf king. He only treats them as wolf cubs. As long as one of them is alive in the end, he will be the new wolf king." The leader of Shuhu department sighed and said, "I'm afraid that he will be bitten to death by these wolf cubs in the end." The fish is mushy again. Wanianyun held her chin up, looked at the grilled fish on the fire, and reminded Tang Ning again. "It doesn't matter," Tang Ning said without moving, "eating mushy food will bring good luck. Maybe we can get rid of the pursuers today." They had been wandering on the grassland for 3 days. During these 3 days, they had eaten nothing except grilled fish without any condiments. Tang Ning even wanted to taste what grass tasted like. Burnt fish has a different taste at least. Really, Wanyanyan looked at him, grilled the fatty fish in her hand until it was a little burnt, took a careful taste, and then spat it out. After running around for 3 days, all she ate was grilled fish. Her face was streaked with black and white, and her true face was no longer distinguishable. It was even worse than when Tang Ning first met her as a child. Wanianyun wiped her mouth and her face suddenly became more rosy. She looked at Tang Ning, sighed, and said, "We were supposed to get married today." Tang Ning also sighed. Of course he wasn't regretting this. He just felt that he had come all the way to the grassland and hadn't finished his work yet. He shouldn't be on the run like this. Wanianyun looked at him and asked, "Why are you sighing?" Tang Ning thought for a while and said, "After we return, if the eldest prince is still well, I will send a message to General Feng Zhou and ask him to send troops to conquer the grassland. At that time, the Sushan people will be handed over to you." The reason why he stayed in the Wen tribe was because he believed that the status of Wanianyun and the third prince were equal. If Wanyan Khan didn't care about the eldest prince's blatant assassination of her, the reason why Tang Ning stayed here would not be the same. Exists again. "I don't want to be a Khan anymore." Wanyanyan shook her head and said, "For this position, they kill brothers and sisters. Being a Khan is not good at all. I don't want to be a Khan anymore." Wanyanyan looked at him and asked, "How about I go back to the capital with you?" Tang Ning looked at her and asked, "You don't want to promote peace between Chengguo and the grassland?" I can't do it. I can't protect so many people. Wang Yanyan lowered her head and said, I can't even protect you. You can do it. Tang Ning looked at her and said, you belong to the grassland, and the grassland needs you. You don't want me to follow you back to the capital. Wang Yanyan suddenly raised her head, looked at him, and asked, who do you think I am? Actually, Tang Ning wanted to explain to her, but at a certain moment she stood up, gripped a scimitar she snatched from a pursuer, and looked forward. More than 20 figures pushed aside the tangled grass and walked towards the side. It's really here. Let's see where you run this time. Surround us, don't let them escape. The opponent had a horse, but Tang Ning and Wang Yanyan abandoned their horses 3 days ago in order not to leave any traces. As a result, they were far inferior to them in terms of speed. These 20 people searched along the river. If they couldn't find them, they would naturally look for the nearest river again. On the grassland, the two people had no food and water sources and could only survive by relying on the river. Unexpectedly, they came up so quickly. Tang Ning protected Wang Yanyan behind her and said, I'll stop them in a while. If you get a chance, run away to the dense forest over there. Wang Yanyan rushed in front of him and said, they don't dare to kill me. I'll stop them. You run first. Tang Ning pulled her behind her and said in a deep voice, while the man is alive, the woman stands behind him. If the eldest prince didn't dare to kill her, why would he send so many people here? After all, Tang Ning was a man. At this time, he would not let a woman stand in front of him. Of course, if Wang Yanyan were Li Tianlan or Su Mei, it would be a different situation. Face must be taken into consideration, but life is equally important. Wang Yanyan stood behind him, raised her head and looked at him, bit her lip, a trace of determination appeared in her eyes, and whispered, we will die together. Tang Ning didn't know what Xiao Mania was thinking. He just hoped that Wei Nianyan could escape smoothly, so that he would have no worries. He couldn't beat these 20 or so people, but that didn't mean he couldn't outrun them. There was a dense forest not far from the river. He was very confident in his Qinggong. As long as he entered the forest, he could outrun them even if he couldn't beat them. His thoughts turned quickly and he turned to look behind him. Seeing Wang Yanyan still standing there, he said angrily, why don't you run away? Wei Nianyan gritted her teeth and said, you are my consort, and we will die together. Damn it, you want to die but I don't want to die. At this time, she was still thinking about all these things. Tang Ning glared at her and said, run. I won't run. Wang Yanyan glared at him, clenched the scimitar in her hand, and stood side by side with him. Not far ahead, someone looked at the leader and asked tentatively, Chief. The masked figure waved his hand and said, kill. Call out. As his words fell, a sound of breaking wind came. He covered his throat, lowered his head, and watched in disbelief as an arrow pierced his throat and he fell to the ground. Call out! Call out! Call out! Countless feather arrows were shot from the dense forest in front, and more than 20 Pucha tribesmen holding scimitars fell to the ground within a few breaths. Tang Ning looked at the pursuers ahead who were shot like hedgehogs by arrows, and asked in confusion, reinforcements are coming. Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 726. The 721st chapter of the main text of Ruyi Xiaolang Jun, a friend's pursuers have arrived. Tang Ning was originally prepared to fight to the death, but he did not expect that at the critical moment, countless hidden arrows were shot from the dense forest in front, turning the Pucha tribe into hedgehogs. Judging from the number of arrows, there are at least 100 people in the dense forest. It seems that reinforcements have arrived. As Tang Ning thought of this, someone in the forest in front suddenly shouted, "Are you a fellow countryman of Chen and Chu by the river?" The people in the forest spoke Chinese. Although the accent was not like the official language of Chen, Tang Ning was not unfamiliar with it. The official language of Chen and Chu was not much different, and Tang Ning was very familiar with the accent of Chu. He seemed to have thought of something, with a look of surprise on his face, and asked loudly, "Is the person in the forest Princess Chang Ning of Chu?" Several figures came out of the forest, and the young general in the lead saw him and said in surprise, "Sir Tang, why are you here?" When Tang Ning saw the young general he had met in Chu, he understood why there was no news about Li Tianlan in these days. This forest is deep and dense, and it is not a problem to hide 300 or 500 people. In the vast grassland, they are hiding in such a secluded place, it is not so easy for the people of the third prince and the eldest prince to find them. Tang Ning walked forward, looked at the young general, and asked, "Is your princess inside?" Yes, the young general nodded and said, "I'll take Lord Tang there right away." Tang Ning had never thought that Li Tianlan's men were hiding here. The reason they helped him just now was probably because he was wearing Han clothes, and this was their hiding place. The people of the Pucha tribe were so close, in order to prevent the news from leaking out, it was the safest way to destroy them as soon as possible. Deep in the dense forest, several simple tents were set up in the forest, and teams of soldiers were patrolling in the forest. The young general led Tang Ning to the tent in the middle and said, "Lord Tang, I'll take you in." Tang Ning waved his hand and said, "No, I'll go in by myself." Tang Ning walked outside the tent, paused, then lifted the curtain again and strode in. A figure stood in the tent, talking quietly with someone, looked back, and his body shook slightly. "Who are you?" A female official saw a stranger walking into the tent, and her eyes were full of doubt. Before she could ask, she saw him stride forward and embrace the princess. Her face suddenly changed and she said angrily, "How dare you?" "It's okay." Li Tianlan looked at her and said, "You go down first." Ah, the female official was stunned for a moment, but she was also a thoughtful person. She looked at Li Tianlan, then at Tang Ning, and immediately nodded and said, "Oh, I'll take my leave." Tang Ning hugged her tightly, and the most intuitive feeling was a familiar and refreshing fragrance in her nose, and a faint oppression from her chest. Then she heard her words of joy and doubt. "Why are you here?" "I came to find you." Tang Ning let go of her and asked, "If I didn't come here, how long would you wait here?" Although the mission given to him by Emperor Chen was to promote peace between the state of Chen and the grassland, Tang Ning was more concerned about his wife. It was not until he saw her today that he breathed a sigh of relief. "I don't plan to stay for long. I have asked people to find out the way and we will leave in the next 2 days." Li Tianlan looked at him and asked, "How did you find this place?" Tang Ning certainly couldn't say that he was chased by someone and stumbled upon it by mistake. He coughed lightly and said, "Intuition." Li Tianlan looked at his messy clothes and embarrassed appearance and asked, "What's going on?" It's a long story." Tang Ning smiled awkwardly and said, "I'll explain it to you slowly later." After he said this, his stomach suddenly made a strange sound. Li Tianlan looked at him and said, "I'll ask someone to bring you some food." Tang Ning looked at her and asked, "Do you have food?" "Yes." Li Tianlan nodded and said, "They caught a lot of fish in the river. Do you want to eat?" Tang Ning rubbed his stomach and said, "No, I'm on a diet recently." After this time, he probably won't touch fish for a long time. Being chased by someone is certainly not a good thing, but Tang Ning's depression was quickly relieved when he met the person he had been thinking about during the chase. Before he could talk to the fifth lady about his longing for her, a noisy voice came from outside the door. "What is he doing in there? Why won't you let me in? Get out of the way, I want to go in." Tang Ning and Li Tianlan walked out of the tent and saw Wang Yanyan quarreling with the guard outside the door. Li Tianlan looked at her and asked, "Who is this?" Wang Yanyan raised her head and said, "I am a friend." Tang Ning explained, "She is the fourth princess of the Wanyan tribe. You have met her before." After 3 days of fleeing, Wang Yanyan was now disheveled and her face was black and white. "Tang Ning, who was so familiar with her, could barely recognize her. It was reasonable that Li Tianlan could not recognize her for a while. Wang Yanyan looked at him, then at Li Tianlan, and the words she was about to say were stuck in her throat. A trace of realization gradually appeared on her face. Li Tianlan smiled and said, "Since you are friends, come in." The three of them walked into the tent. Li Tianlan looked at him and said, "Why are you here?" She saw the two of them in such a miserable state. She was so smart that she would not be able to pass this level if she did not tell the truth. Tang Ning looked at her and said, "Actually, we were being chased here." He still chose to tell the truth, including why he came to the grassland, what he had done during this period, and the recent changes in the grassland situation. After listening to him, Li Tianlan looked at Wang Yanyan and asked Tang Ning, "Do you want Miss Wanyan to become the Khan?" Tang Ning nodded and said, "War is the suffering of the people. If Chen Chu can coexist peacefully with the grassland, there will never be so many wars again. Wang Yanyan becoming the Khan is not only beneficial to the state of Chen, but also has strategic significance for the state of Chu." Li Tianlan can naturally understand this matter. He looked at Tang Ning and asked, "What are you going to do next?" "Go back first." Tang Ning thought for a while and said, "If Wang Yanhan favors the eldest prince, send troops to the grassland and attack Huanglong directly. By the way, this place is closer to the state of Chen. Otherwise, you can go back to Fengzhou tomorrow and wait for my news." Wang Yanyan, who always likes to chatter, is rare in silence today, lowering her head and saying nothing. After not seeing each other for 2 years, Tang Ning still had a lot to say to Li Tianlan. She looked at Wang Yanyan and said, "Go and have a rest first. We will set off again tomorrow morning." Wang Yanyan was led into another simple tent by a female official. After the female official left, she gritted her teeth and said aggrievedly, "What friend? You are my consort. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 727. Chapter 722 of the main volume of the Ruyi Young Man. The sad man confirmed that Li Tianlan was fine, and Tang Ning finally felt at ease. There was only 1 year left of the 3-year agreement. The reason why she made the 3-year agreement was because she wanted to solve the threat to the grassland and help the Chu country stabilize the situation in these 3 years. If Wang Yanyan could succeed in taking over the grassland would with the threat removed, the 3-year agreement can be ended early. They were originally dispersed by the third prince with heavy troops, and it was not easy to leave a few tents. There was nothing in the tent except for a temporarily assembled wooden bed made from local materials. Li Tianlan sat by the bed, looked at him, and asked, "We haven't seen each other for 2 years. Don't you have anything to say to me?" Tang Ning sat next to her and asked, "Yes, what do you want to hear?" Li Tianlan said, "Let's start with the third and fourth ladies of the Tang family. People often say that a short farewell is better than a wedding. However, Tang Ning and Li Tianlan's little farewell did not seem to be better than a newlywed. The reason is that the environment here is not very good. It is located in the wild and there is nothing except a weak wooden bed. Of course, they talked all night long yesterday and didn't sleep all night, so the wooden bed was not used." When Tang Ning saw Wang Yanyan the next day, her eyes were a little swollen, probably because she hadn't slept well. During these days of being on the run, neither of them had a good night's sleep. Fortunately, this journey is over. 100 Chu soldiers in disguise will escort them back to the Wen tribe, including Li Tianlan. In the morning, Tang Ning still drank some fish soup. Wei Nianyun didn't want people to see her swollen eyes, so she hid behind a tree and drank the soup alone. No one noticed her, and naturally no one noticed the complicated look in her eyes when she looked at the two people talking and laughing in front of the tent. The goal of returning to the Wen tribe this time is too big. The remaining Chu soldiers will return to Fengzhou first and wait for deployment. They walked out of the dense forest and burned the bodies of the Pucha tribe. When they walked through a grass hill, they saw more than 10 light cavalry coming slowly not far ahead. The weather was very hot, but those people had their faces covered. Seeing these familiar figures, Tang Ning smiled on her face. The dozen or so cavalrymen in front were also stunned. They had just seen the thick smoke billowing from a distance and thought it was the escaping fourth princess and the consort. Who would have thought that after crossing a grassy hill, they suddenly discovered that there were hundreds of cavalrymen in front of them? Time stood still. When they discovered that these cavalry were actually running towards them, they were so frightened that they turned their horses around and ran away in the direction they came from. However, how could the dozen or so tired horses compare to the energetic horses that had rested for so long? After a while, more than a dozen people were tied into rice dumplings and brought to Tang Ning and Wang Yanyan. Wang Yanyan pulled off the leader's face scarf, shook it, and said sadly, "Chahan, it's really you." The man named Chahan had an earthy face and said in a trembling voice, "Fourth princess, spare your life. These are the orders of the eldest prince. I dare not disobey them." The young general walked up to Tang Ning and asked, "Sir, what's wrong with these people?" Tang Ning waved her hand and said, "Take them back first, I still have use for them." After he finished speaking, he looked at Wang Yanyan and asked, "Princess, do you have any objections?" Wang Yanyan glanced at him, turned away, and did not speak to him. Wen Department. The fourth princess and the consort had disappeared for several days. The Wen tribe searched for them with all their might, but could not find any trace of them. Many people were speculating that the princess and the consort might have harmed the eldest prince. In a tent somewhere, Ayu looked gloomy and said, "The Khan is protecting the eldest prince. If anything happens to the princess, we will take these tribes out." Chen Zhou even had a dark face and whispered, "If there is no news tomorrow, I will repair the book and return to Fengzhou. If something happens to you, General Xiao will lead his troops to level the place and make your Khan your master buried with him." Although Ayu was angry, she was still a grassland person after all. When she heard Chen Zhou uttering such arrogance, she glanced at him and asked, "Is it just you?" Chen Zhou glanced at her coldly, "You can try it." Ayu clenched the scimitar at her waist and said solemnly, "Just give it a try." "Stop making any noise," Aina glared at the two of them and said, "Just be quiet for a while." When the two heard this, they glared at each other and turned away. Aina glanced at the two of them and said, "The prince-in-law is smarter than ordinary people. With him here, the princess will be fine. Ayu, please ask someone to expand the search scope. Chenzhou, write to Fengzhou immediately, be ready to respond to possible changes at any time." Ayu nodded and said, "Yes." Chenzhou took a deep breath and said, "I understand." When the three of them walked out of the big tent, someone suddenly ran from a distance and said, "Chief, the princess and the consort are back." The three of them were overjoyed when they heard this and blurted out, "Where is it?" When Tang Ning, Wang Yanyan, and Li Tianlan walked to the entrance of Wen Gate, Aina and others quickly came out to greet them. Ayu ran forward, looked at them, breathed a sigh of relief, and said, "Princess, Prince Consort, you are okay, it's really great." Li Tianlan raised her eyebrows slightly, "Consort?" Tang Ning looked at her meaningful eyes and suddenly felt a headache. Wang Yanyan forced a smile on her face and walked straight to her tent. Ayu looked at Aina and asked, "The princess seems unhappy." Aina shook her head and said helplessly, "The princess already knows that the Khan did not punish the eldest prince. The eldest brother wanted to kill her, and her father did not care about it." No one could understand her sadness at this moment. Ayu clenched her fists, looked at the people of the Tudan tribe who were tied up, and kicked the leader fiercely. "Assholes, who asked you to assassinate the princess? What a big dog guts. Just as Yu punched and kicked the people of the Tudan tribe, Tang Ning looked at Li Tianlan in the tent and explained, "This is just a stopgap measure. If I don't take action at that time, her tribe will fall into the hands of the eldest prince and the third prince, and then our mission to the north will fail. In desperation, we have to resort to this last resort." Li Tianlan nodded, believing his words, and then asked, "But Miss Wanyan doesn't seem to be a stopgap measure for you." Tang Ning sighed. If he still hasn't seen Wanyan Yan's mind, he is too stupid. How similar is she now to Zhao Man back then? But there is only one Zhao Man, and Tang Ning is not the same as before. Wanyan Yan belongs to the grassland. Only she can promote the stability of Chenchu and the grassland. It is impossible for her to stay in the capital or in Guizhou with him. Of course, the most important reason is that he has never had any feelings for Wanyan Yan. He looked at Li Tianlan and said, "Don't worry, I will deal with this matter before I leave." In Wanyan Yan's tent, Iina and Yu walked in and saw her sitting on the bed in a daze. They looked at each other and were a little at a loss. In the end, Iina stepped forward and said, "Princess, don't be sad. Khan, the ruthlessness of the eldest prince and the third prince, the princess has known it for a long time, why should she be angry about these things?" Wanyan Yan looked down at the ground, tears rolled down her eyes, and choked up and said, "My eldest brother wants to kill me. My father doesn't care if he kills me, and he doesn't want me anymore." Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 728. Chapter 723 of the main text of Ruyi Little Man, I Hate You. This time the eldest prince assassinated them and did not get any punishment. Weinianyun was sad, everyone in the Wen tribe was angry, and Tang Ning got some important information from it. He used to think that by helping Wanyanyan develop her strength, when the tribe in her hands far surpassed that of the eldest prince and the third prince, the position of Khan would naturally be determined. It now appears that he was on the wrong track from the start. Wanyanyan has never been the object of Wanyan Khan's consideration. Her existence is probably just a grindstone for the eldest prince or the third prince. Wanyanyan's status in Wanyan Khan's heart was different, so the measures they needed to take were different. If she could compete fairly with the eldest prince, Tang Ning would be able to make steady progress. If fate was unfair to her, then she would use force to intervene. Before that, Tang Ning had to finalize one thing. He walked out of the tent and happened to see Aina and Aya walking out of Wanyanyan's tent. He looked at Aina and said, "Those people from Tushumbu." Snort. Aina and Aya snorted at the same time, glared at him, and turned away. Tang Ning looked at them in surprise. Before Aina disappeared, she raised her voice and said, "Remember to send those from the disciple division to the Khan and see what he will do." Although Aina ignored him, she still listened to Tang Ning and sent the more than 20 people to the main Wanyan department. Wanyan's main department. In the Khan's tent, a man walked in from the outside and said to Wanyan Khan, who was studying the map, "Khan, the fourth princess has returned to the Wen tribe and sent away the 20 Tudan tribesmen who were chasing her and her consort. Come over." Wanyan Khan did not raise his head and said casually, "I know." The man paused and then asked, "May I ask Khan, how should we deal with these people?" Wanyan Khan said, "Crack each of them with 100 whips, and ask the disciples to come and take them back." The man's lips opened. He really didn't expect that to assassinate the princess and the consort, he only needed 100 whips. Although 100 whips could kill them, the Khan obviously didn't mean this. He thought for a while and said, "Khan, if this is the case, the tribes may be dissatisfied with the eldest prince." Wanyan Khan looked calm and said, "Then beat them until they are convinced." The man didn't dare to say any more, and after responding, he slowly withdrew. The 20 people who assassinated Wanyanyan were each given 100 lashes and were taken back by the Tushan tribe. After hearing the news, Tang Ning suddenly felt a little sorry for Wanyanyan. Her biological brother wanted to kill her, and her biological father watched his biological brother kill her. It was a great sadness to be born in such a family. To some extent, she is even more pitiable than Zhao Man. After all, although Chen Huang was a little ruthless, he was still a human being, and he was a qualified emperor. Tiger poison did not eat its children, and Wanyan Khan's behavior was no longer a human being. People without humanity are very scary. He was able to unify the various tribes of Sushen and became the first person to create a world for Sushen. Sure enough, he has his perversion. There was no doubt that the eldest prince was Wanyan Khan's favorite candidate. After letting go of the Tushan tribe, he ordered Wanyan Yan and the third prince to hand over control of the tribe within half a month. The third prince and the fourth princess had no clans under them, and only the eldest prince was left. Wanyan Khan's intention could not be more obvious. In this way, he has nothing to tempt. Tang Ning has already sent Chen Zhou to quickly go to Fengzhou and inform Xiao Ju to prepare troops, horses, food, and grass, and be ready to send troops to the grassland at any time. Wei Nianyuan didn't come out of the tent for a whole day. Tang Ning looked at Li Tianlan and said, "I'll go see her." He walked into Wanyan Yan's tent and saw her lying on the bed, wrapped tightly in the quilt. The news that came one after another in the past 2 days was indeed a big blow to her. Tang Ning walked to the bed and sat down, pulling her quilt and letting her head peek out. The next moment, she pulled the quilt hard again and buried her head in it again. Hiding like this was not an option, so Tang Ning stood up, picked up her quilt, and then put it back honestly. Because she was only wearing a belly band and underpants, Tang Ning was secretly alert. Next time before lifting the quilt off a girl, it would be best to determine what she was wearing underneath. The blow Wei Nianyuan suffered this time was obviously greater than the one in Chu State. Even after Tang Ning lifted the quilt, she did not open her eyes to look at him once. Tang Ning gently shook her shoulders and said, "Get up." Wanyan closed her eyes and did not respond. Tang Ning said, "The tribe under you is going to be taken back. If you don't get up, you won't be able to be a Khan." Wei Nianyuan suddenly opened her eyes, which were extremely red and swollen, and said in a hoarse voice, "I didn't want to be a Khan in the first place. To be a Khan would mean betraying the tribe and the people. I don't want to be a Khan anymore. Why are you forcing me? Why are you forcing me? I hate you." She cried so hard that after saying the last 3 words, she bit down on Tang Ning's arm. Blood soon oozed from Tang Ning's arm, and there was severe pain in her arm, but he didn't even frown. One time. Because he was thinking about what Wanyan Yan said. She actually didn't want to be a Khan. Accepting the help of Tang Ning and Chen Guo to become a Khan meant that she would betray the tribe and the grassland. Although her original intention was to have the 2 countries coexist peacefully, she had to be pure-hearted. When she did these things, she was forced to do so. Her eyes were empty, with a despair that Tang Ning had never seen before. After being hunted by her brother and abandoned by her father, her life had lost hope. Tang Ning thought about Li Tianlan's safety, Chen Chu's peace, and the stability of the grassland. He wanted to go back and reunite with his family as soon as possible, but he never asked her if she was willing. There were 2 wet marks on Tang Ning's arm, one was his blood, and the other was her tears. He looked down at Wanyan Yan, who had cried so hard that she lost her voice, patted her shoulder gently, and said, "I don't want to be a husband anymore, I don't want to be a husband anymore, I'm sorry, it's all my fault." His words seemed to break through the last line of defense in Wanyan Yan's heart. She threw herself into Tang Ning's arms, hugged him tightly, and choked up, "You're my husband, you snatched me away, why don't you want me now, why do you force me to do something I don't like, I hate you so much." Tang Ning's arm soon felt wet. He stretched out his arm, held her shoulders, and sighed, "I can't protect myself, how can I accept you?" Wanyan Yan shook her head and said, "Excuses, all excuses. Aina said, you are a very important official in Chen state. No matter how high the official position is, he is still a minister. Wanyan Khan likes the eldest prince, and Emperor Chen likes Prince Duan. No matter whether Prince Run will come later, Tang Ning will make the final decision with the Tang family within a year. At that time, he will completely stand on the opposite side of the Tang family and Prince Duan. Of course, he also stood on the opposite side of Emperor Chen. Everything Tang Ning has is given by Emperor Chen. If he wants, he can take it back at any time. By then, although Chen state is big, where can he stay? Wang Yanyan's idea of living with him in the capital was originally a dream bubble. After he finished explaining this, Wang Yanyan raised her head, looked at him with red and swollen eyes, and asked, really? Tang Ning nodded and said, really? Wang Yanyan asked again, then you don't like me anymore? Tang Ning finally saw the light of hope in her eyes rekindled. How could he let it go out? He shook his head and said, no. Wang Yanyan looked at him, wiped her tears, gritted her teeth and said, I want to be the Khan. Why? Tang Ning looked at her and asked in confusion, didn't you not want to be it just now? Wang Yanyan sniffed and gritted her teeth and said, when I become the Khan, if the Emperor of Chen bullies you, I will lead the warriors on the grassland to flatten the Chen kingdom. Women are so fickle. 1 second she was crying and accusing Tang Ning of forcing her, and the next second she was determined to fight for the position of Khan. After Wang Yanyan came to her senses, she looked at the bleeding teeth marks on Tang Ning's arm and asked distressedly, does it hurt? Tang Ning looked at her and asked, how about I bite you and try? Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 729. Chapter 724 of the main text of Ruyi Little Man, Not Cruel Enough. Yan Yan covered her arms and hid under the quilt. Tang Ning glanced at her and said, get up, there are still many things waiting for us to do. Wang Yanyan hid under the quilt with only her head exposed and said, then when will you marry me? Wait another 3 years. Tang Ning looked at her and said, in 3 years, I should have dealt with everything. If you haven't changed your mind, come find me. Wang Yanyan had just crawled out of the abyss of despair, and Tang Ning could no longer reach out to push her in. The 3-year agreement is a temporary solution. After 3 years, her temperament may have matured and she may change her mind. If she hadn't changed her mind, a girl would be willing to wait for him for so long, even a stone would be moved. Wang Yanyan thought for a while and said, okay, 3 years will be 3 years. 3 years is neither short nor long. The 3-year contract between Tang Ning and Li Tianlan seemed like just yesterday. When she was sitting across from Tang Ning and bandaging his arm, the 3-year contract ended in less than a year. Li Tianlan bandaged his arm seriously and asked without raising his head, have you comforted her? Tang Ning nodded and said, that's good. How to comfort me? It was stupid to lie in front of Li Tianlan and Sumei. One of them was extremely smart and the other understood people's hearts, so Tang Ning had no choice but to tell the truth. 3-year agreement. Li Tianlan looked up at him and said, you seem to like the 3-year agreement very much. How about we make one too? Tang Ning was stunned and said, we have already made a decision, and the deadline is only 1 year away. Can you handle everything in 1 year? Li Tianlan lowered his eyelids slightly and said, besides, the Tang family even has a 4th wife. Is there any difference between 1 and 3 years? Tang Ning finally understood that the root of the problem was not 1 year or 3 years, but that her 3rd wife became the 5th wife in 2 years. He swallowed his saliva and said, I try to handle everything within a year. Li Tianlan helped him bandage the wound and said, then come to Chu country to see me after you have dealt with all the matters. Li Tianlan walked out of the tent, and Tang Ning sat on the bed alone, thinking that she was really angry. A year later, when she came to him, the result was different from when Tang Ning came to find her. If Tang Ning goes to the Chu kingdom, the first person she will have to face is not her, but Emperor Chu. That old fox is not that easy to deal with. Tang Ning feels a headache just thinking about it. When he had a headache, Lao Zheng walked out, glanced at him, and said, "I'm back." Tang Ning didn't see Lao Zheng for 2 days after she came back. Chen Zhou said that he had gone out to look for him. Tang Ning was a little touched. When she was in danger, she took a huge risk to stay alone to break up the family. After they disappeared, she went out to look for him alone. As a bodyguard, Lao Zheng is undoubtedly very qualified. Lao Zheng stopped dozens of people that day. Tang Ning looked at him and asked, "Are you okay?" "It's okay." Old Zheng shook his head and said, "It's just that the knife is blunt." Tang Ning asked, "Where are those people who were ambushed? Have they been caught?" Lao Zheng glanced at him and said, "They are all dead." All dead." Tang Ning looked at him in shock. There were 50 of them, and they were all carefully selected warriors from the Pucha tribe. Could it be that they were all hacked to death by him? He was stunned for a long time and thought of something. He looked at Lao Zheng and murmured, "You let us go first, aren't you, worried about killing us all?" Old Zheng looked at him calmly and did not answer. Tang Ning read the answer in his eyes. Those were 50 people, not 50 pigs. Although there was no need to be merciful to the enemy who wanted his life, Tang Ning couldn't accept it in his heart if he had to kill 50 people like melons and vegetables. Although Lao Zheng always seemed to be smiling, Tang Ning never thought that he was a kind person. The old beggar once said that the number of souls who died under his hands were hundreds if not thousands. If they had not been soaked in the mountains of corpses and seas of blood, it would be impossible to accumulate them. Such a strong evil spirit. In Lao Zheng's eyes, those 50 people were no different from pigs and sheep waiting to be slaughtered. Tang Ning glanced at Lao Zheng and couldn't help feeling a little cold. She walked outside the tent and basked in the sun before she felt better. Aina walked over from the side and looked at him with a lighter expression than the previous 2 days. She walked up to him and said, "The Khan ordered the princess and the consort to go to the main department to discuss matters. The princess asked me to ask the consort for his opinion." Tang Ning waved her hand and said, "I'm not going." Wanyan Khan didn't even care about Wanyan Yan's life and death, so how could he convene them for a discussion? This was obviously a hangman banquet ordering them to hand over power. Unless they really planned to listen to him, or simply flipped the table and rebelled, who would be there? Going to the main department at this time? Aina thought for a while and said, "The third prince has gone, but we don't go. Isn't it a bit bad?" Tang Ning looked at her and asked in surprise, "The third prince is gone?" Based on Tang Ning's understanding of the third prince, he was more scheming than the eldest prince, and he was not someone who gave up so easily. The fact that he chose to obey so quickly this time was somewhat beyond Tang Ning's expectations. He looked at Aina and asked, "Is the news true?" "It's true." Aina nodded and said, "The third prince has already brought the command talisman to the main headquarters, and is waiting for the fourth princess." Tang Ning was surprised. He just gave up like that? Aina shook her head and said, "What can you do if you don't give up? The tribe in the hands of the eldest prince, plus the tribe in the hands of the Khan, the third prince and the fourth princess combined, are far inferior. The third prince can't come even if he wants to, you know this." "Then leave him alone." Tang Ning waved her hand and said, "Just say that the fourth princess is not feeling well, and we will go there next time." Aina nodded, knowing that this was a delaying tactic. When Chen's army is gathered together, plus the tribes in the hands of the fourth princess, even if Khan integrates the other tribes, he will not be their opponent. Wanyan department is the main department and the central tent. The third prince was summoned by the Khan and led the leaders of his tribes to hand over the command talisman. The command talisman is the certificate that drives each tribe. Each tribe has a command talisman. See the talisman but not the person. This is the rule set by the Khan. If the third prince has the command talisman of all the tribes, then he will be the new member of Sushan. Of Khan. Of course, Today he came here to hand over the command talisman. After handing over the command talisman, he will never have the chance to become a Khan again in this life. In the tent, Wanyan Khan looked at the third prince and said calmly, "Do you know how you are inferior to your elder brother?" The third prince lowered his head and said, "I don't know, kid." Wanyan Khan glanced at him and said, "You are not as ruthless as him. Since ancient times, whoever has achieved great things has been ruthless." He looked at the third prince and said, "If I hadn't been ruthless like your uncle back then, I wouldn't have the Wanyan department today." The third prince buried his head deeper and said, "I understand, kid." Wanyan Khan looked at him and said, "Hand over the command talisman. From now on, you will stay in the ministry and stop meddling in clan affairs." The third prince took out a box from his arms, stepped forward, and handed it over respectfully. Wanyan Khan reached out to take it, but at the next moment, his body trembled suddenly and he looked at him in disbelief. The third prince finally raised his head, pulled out the dagger inserted in his chest, and said seriously, "There is one thing that my father made a mistake about. If I want to be ruthless, my eldest brother is not ruthless enough." He took the box over again, looked at Wanyan Khan, grinned, and said, "Those who achieve great things must be ruthless. This is what my father Khan taught me." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 730. The third prince pulled out the dagger inserted in Wanyan Khan's chest, and the sharp weapon passed through his heart. This man, one of the most powerful people in the world today and the owner of half of the grassland, did not have a few breaths left to live. Wanyan Khan's chest was stained red with blood, and his face was pale. He took a few steps back and knocked over a low table. He leaned on the low table, covering his chest, and sat on the ground. The third prince took out a piece of white cloth from his arms, wiped the blood on the dagger, squatted next to Wanyan Khan, looked at him, and asked with a smile, "Is it cruel enough now? How dare you kill your father?" Wanyan Khan gasped and forced out a few words through his teeth. "I didn't dare before." The third prince shook his head and said, "It was all forced by my father Khan. Wanyan Chu assassinated the fourth sister. If you think he is ruthless enough, you should pass the position of Khan to him. Now I am better than him, he is even more ruthless. Father Khan should also pass on the position of Khan to me, right?" Wanyan Khan looked directly at him, which made the third prince's heart tremble. Ha ha ha. At a certain moment, Wanyan Khan suddenly raised his head and laughed. The third prince could understand his anger and disappointment, but he was startled by his sudden laughter. He took a few steps back and asked, "Why are you laughing?" "Sure enough, he is my Wanyan Lai's son." Wanyan Khan looked at the dagger in his hand and asked, "Do you still remember where this dagger came from?" The third prince looked at him and said, "My father Khan gave it to me when I was 7 years old." Wanyan Khan laughed twice, sprayed blood from the corner of his mouth, and said, "I used this dagger to pierce Father Khan's chest back then." The third prince's pupils shrank suddenly and he asked in shock, "Did you kill my grandfather?" Wanyan Khan wiped the corners of his mouth and asked, "Otherwise, how do you think this position of Khan came to be?" He looked at the third prince and asked, "Do you know why I gave you this dagger?" The third prince looked at him and remained silent. "Because among the princes, you are the most like me." Wanyan Khan coughed a few times, and more blood foam came from his mouth. He grinned, showing his blood-red teeth, and said, "Now it seems that I was right." The third prince turned pale, looked at him, and said tremblingly, "Why? The warriors on the grassland are all wolves." Wanyan Khan covered his chest, his voice was hoarse, and he leaned on the low table and said, "You have to kill your brother and the old Wolf King before you can become the new Wolf King." Wolf King. He stared at the third prince with sharp eyes, and using his last bit of strength, he said sternly, Wolf does not need to compromise, whether it is Heyman or Chen Chu. If anyone wants to stop you, do you know what to do? The third prince looked at him, grinned, and said solemnly, bite them to death. Ha 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 ha. Wanyan Khan looked at him, laughed wildly, smiled, and his voice gradually became quieter until there was no sound. When the third prince and the Khan were in the tent, there was no attendant in the tent. The two guards outside the tent looked suspicious when they heard the Khan laughing. The Khan was preparing to pass the throne to the eldest prince. The third prince came today to hand over the command talisman. The conversation between the two was destined to be unpleasant, but judging from the happy laughter of the Khan, it seemed that was not the case. At this moment, two figures came from a distance, walked outside the tent, and asked, "Is the Khan in the tent?" The two are the current leaders of the Shuhu and Jiagu tribes. The guard immediately bowed and said, "The Khan is discussing important matters with the third prince. Please wait a moment." The two waited outside the tent for a long time, but there was no movement from inside the tent. Just when they were about to step in, the third prince opened the curtain and walked out. The two bowed slightly and said, "Third prince." It turns out they are two leaders. The third prince looked at them and said, "Father is not feeling well and has just rested. If you have anything to do, it is the same as mine." The leader of the Shuhu tribe looked at him and said, "In that case, let's wait until the Khan wakes up." The third prince took out two talismans from his arms and said, "Father Khan has just passed on the position of Khan to me. In the future, you can report directly to me if you have anything to do." These two command talismans belonged to Jiagu and Shuhu. When they saw this, their expressions changed drastically. The person whom the Khan intended to pass on to the throne was clearly the eldest prince, so how could he suddenly change his mind? However, the command talisman held by the third prince was not fake. What happened in the middle? The leader of the Shuhu tribe forced himself to calm down and said, "This matter is of great importance. The two of us have to meet the Khan in person." The third prince looked at them and said, "From now on, I am the Khan." The two of them glanced at him and forced their way into the tent. "Call out! Call out! Call out!" A few feather arrows hit the ground under their feet, and if they moved an inch further, they would pierce the soles of their feet. The two stopped and looked at the several leaders and hundreds of warriors under the third prince's command behind them. They looked at each other, knowing that Wanyan Khan would never have a chance to speak again. The third prince looked at them and asked, "Do the two leaders have any objections to me?" The third prince holds the command talisman and has the capital to command the various ministries. If the Khan can never speak again, the situation on the grassland is already very clear. Although two princes and one princess divided up dozens of tribes, the most powerful tribe in Sushan was still in the hands of the Khan. These tribes were enough to be equal to the combined power of the eldest prince, 3 princes and 4 princesses. If this power is also controlled by the third prince, he will be invincible on the grassland. The two looked at the third prince, pursed their lips, knelt down and said, "See Khan." The third prince smiled, looked at them, and said, "Father Khan has been unwell for a long time. Today, he suddenly fell ill and died in the tent. The tribe still depends on you two to maintain stability." The guess in his heart was confirmed. The leaders of Jiagu and Shuhu looked at each other again and had made a decision. They bowed and spoke respectfully at the same time. "Don't worry, third prince. I will do my best." The Khan suddenly fell ill and passed the throne to the third prince before his death. Although this was inconsistent with the previous rumors that the Khan valued the eldest prince more, the third prince held the order and quickly took control of the Wanyan main tribe. He had dozens of tribes under his command and became the real master of the Wanyan tribe. At this time, hundreds of miles away from the main tribe of the Wanyan tribe, the eldest prince fell off the bed, his face extremely pale. "Father, is my father dead?" He passed the khanship to Wanyan Hong. "How is this possible? It was me that my father wanted to pass the throne to." It must be Wanyan Hong who killed my father. It must be him. He got up from the ground, barefoot, and screamed, "Traitor, he is a traitor. The Khan is mine, the Khan is mine." Several tribal leaders surrounded him and said, "Grand Prince, the third prince has taken control of a large number of tribes through the order. We can't stay here anymore." The eldest prince looked blank, as if he had suffered a major blow. He kept muttering, "Traitor, traitor. Uyan tribe." Wanyan Khan asked Wanyan Yan to hand over the dozen or so order tokens a few days ago. Tang Ning and Wanyan Yan ignored him. In the past few days, they had united their tribes and were ready to deal with emergencies at any time. But Wanyan Khan did not urge them. Tang Ning waited for 2 days, but no one came to ask for the order tokens. Instead, he received another earth-shattering news. Wanyan Khan died of illness, and before his death, he passed the throne to the third prince, which means that the third prince is already the new Khan of Sushan. When Tang Ning heard the news, he was shocked and speechless for a long time. After a long time, he moved his lips and exclaimed, "How humming cruel! Fortunate young gentleman." Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 731. Things are unpredictable. It is rumored that Wanyan Khan was not in good health. It was expected that he would die of illness or suddenly die. What was unexpected was that the third prince became the Khan. It was really inexplicable. As we all know, among these princes and princesses, Wanyan Khan preferred the eldest prince. A few days ago, he ordered the third prince and the fourth princess to hand over the order, which was obviously paving the way for the eldest prince. It was only 2 days later that he passed the throne to the third prince, which made people think more. There are even rumors that the third prince killed his father and usurped the throne. Wanyan Khan did not die suddenly, but was killed by him. The third prince was so crazy that he did such a thing. The heavens were angry, the people were resentful, and the gods were angry. The eldest prince used this as an excuse to quickly win over several tribes that were originally directly under Wanyan Khan and competed with the third prince, but so far, no large-scale conflict has occurred. This is because their power is still unstable. The third prince has just taken over the power. What he needs to do most is to stabilize the people's hearts, otherwise the tribes under his command will be snatched away by the eldest prince with the slogan of rectifying the chaos. Similarly, the eldest prince's strength is slightly inferior to the third prince. It is not good for them to take the initiative to attack. They are just waiting for an opportunity to make a fatal blow to the third prince at any time while strengthening themselves. The situation on the grassland changed drastically overnight. The eldest prince and the third prince were both wary of each other and could not take care of Wanyan Yan for the time being. After learning the news of Wanyan Khan's death, Wanyan Yan locked herself in the room for a whole day and did not come out. The next day, her eyes were swollen like peaches. Tang Ning boiled 2 eggs for her to reduce the swelling. Wanyan Yan lowered her head and said in a low voice, "My mother is dead, my father is dead, my second brother is dead, and my eldest and third brothers also want each other to die. Why do they do this?" Tang Ning gently patted her shoulder to comfort her. This wolf-like culture of sons killing fathers and brothers killing brothers on the grassland is not unique to the grassland. It often happens even among the Han people. However, compared with the grassland, the Han people are more taboo about these things. Generally, they will not put them out in the open without any disguise. The means they use in secret are much dirtier than these grassland people. When desire is strong enough, human nature will be suppressed. Once animal nature prevails, it is not surprising to do anything. The tribes under Wanyan Yan have not yet entered wartime alert. No one will pay attention to her before the eldest prince and the third prince fight with bayonets to decide the winner. They can afford to wait for this period of time. Xiao Ju should have set off now. Before he arrives, it is not bad to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. Li Tianlan did not plan to stay in Wuyan tribe to watch the excitement of the eldest prince and the third prince like him. After the death of Wanyan Khan, the situation on the grassland has been in chaos. She wants to return to the army of Chu to deal with all the changes that may happen next. They have to separate not long after meeting. Although Tang Ning is reluctant, she did not stop her. Tang Ning is the commander of the 400,000 strong army of Chen State, and she is also the head of the Chu military. For either of them, now is obviously not the time to be sentimental. Of course, before she left, the two of them still had a sentimental relationship for a while. After that, Tang Ning felt chest tightness and shortness of breath. When Wanyan Yan came over with a letter, Tang Ning was about to speak, but he stretched out his hand and motioned her to wait for a while. He took a few deep breaths of fresh air, and when the chest tightness got better, he asked, "What's the matter?" Wanyan Yan put the letter on the table and said, "It's from my third brother. He asked me to hand over the tribes in my hands to him." Although the third prince was not legitimate and was charged with patricide, he had indeed become the Khan. However, the Sushan tribes, and a large part of them were in the hands of the eldest prince. Wanyan Yan had a lot of power, so naturally everyone wanted to fight for it. The eldest prince had just sent people to hunt her down, so he naturally had no face to come and surrender again. In this way, the third prince got a bargain. According to the rules, he could take back the tribes under Wanyan Yan with one order. The reason why he wrote a letter specifically must be that he had hit a snag with those tribes. Tang Ning waved his hand and said, "Don't worry about him." Wanyan Yan nodded, then looked at him and asked in surprise, "What's wrong with your mouth? Why is it swollen?" Tang Ning covered his mouth and said, "Nothing." "What do you mean nothing? It's obviously swollen. Did you get bit by a bug?" Wanyan Yan came up, took his hand away, and said, "Why are you so careless?" Azun tribe. A big thing happened on the grassland. Wanyan Khan died. The third prince and the eldest prince competed for the throne. Most of the Sushan tribes chose a team. Their choice determined the survival of the tribe. I don't know how many people couldn't sleep at night these days. Azun tribe didn't need to take sides. They were originally a tribe under the fourth princess. No matter how fiercely the eldest prince and the third prince fought, it would not affect the fourth princess. At this time, the leader of the Azun tribe looked at a person and said, "If you want us to surrender to the third prince, of course we can. Bring the token." The Azun tribe only looks at the token. The man who was ordered by the third prince to surrender the Azun tribe frowned and said, "Is the Khan's words not as good as a token?" The leader of the Azun tribe said calmly, "This is the rule set by the old Khan. Since it is a rule, it cannot be broken." The man glanced at the leader of the Azun tribe and said helplessly, "The token is with the fourth princess. The fourth princess does not listen to the Khan's orders. When the Khan quells the rebellion of the eldest prince, it will naturally be the turn of the fourth princess. That's a matter for the future." The leader of the Azun tribe shook his head and said, "Please go back today, envoy." The messenger had a sullen face and asked, "What's so good about the fourth princess? Do you really want to be loyal to the fourth princess?" "Of course the fourth princess is good. The fourth princess is good because she gives them food. With the food given by the fourth princess and the dried meat they store, they can survive the cold winter. Will the third prince give them these?" The leader of the Orjun department looked at him and asked, "What are the benefits of being loyal to the third prince? Will the third prince give us food?" "Food," the envoy looked at him and said, "After loyal to the third prince, you need to hand over the excess food of the tribe. The soldiers have to quell the chaos and resist the black barbarians. Only when all the tribes work together and be careful, only the bloodline can continue. If you are loyal to the fourth princess, you will have the food to survive. If you are loyal to the third prince, not only will you have no food, but you will have to hand over the original food." The leader of the Azun department looked at the envoy and said coldly, "Get out." Wanyan department, within the main department. The third prince listened to the reports of several envoys with a sullen face. The people he sent out to recruit various tribes had all returned. However, none of the tribes that originally belonged to the fourth princess were recruited. The third prince slapped his palm heavily on the table and said angrily, "Does she also plan to stand on her own feet?" "Khan, calm down," a person beside him advised. "Our biggest enemy now is the eldest prince. The matter of the fourth princess will not be solved until the eldest prince is dealt with." The third prince naturally knew the priority of the matter, sat down again, and stopped mentioning the matter. The man thought of something and said, "One more thing. South of Yinshan Mountain, Chen's army seems to have made some changes. Will they also want to take this opportunity to attack the grassland?" "Then let them come." The third prince's face turned cold and he said, "I just need them to establish my authority. For those who live on the grassland, Chen Chu's army is a joke on the grassland." The man stopped continuing the topic and said instead, "The eldest prince, my subordinates have an idea.